All right, we're recording.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to call this meeting to order. It is the West Haven Subcommittee of the MARB. It is November the 17th, and this morning the time is 10:05. I'm Kimberly Kennison. I'm the designee for Secretary McCaw, and with me today is Christine Shaw, designee for Treasurer Wooden. The second item on the agenda this morning is to approve the minutes from September 22nd. If I could get a motion, please.
So moved.
So moved.
Say, who is the motion, please?
Tom Hamilton moved.
Okay, thank you. And the second?
Bob White second.
Thank you, Bob. Perfect. Any discussion? Can I get a roll call, Julian, for the votes? Whether you're in favor, opposed, or you'd wish to abstain.
Mr. White,
Yes.
Mr. Hamilton,
Yes.
Mr. Felsigno,
Here, yes.
Ms. Shaw,
She probably went on mute.
we'll come back to her. Ms. Kennison,
Yes.
are there any other subcommittee members on who I did not mention?
I'll get that. Christine Shaw, could you respond to the minute vote?
Hi, this is Christine Shaw. I just dialed back in. Are you
I
asking
saw-
on my vote?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
I support the motion to approve.
Thank you.
Okay, that's
Okay.
everybody.
Thank you. And the minutes have been approved. But we have another set of minutes to be approved. I'm looking for a motion for the minutes of October the 20th, please.
So moved. Bob White.
Thank you.
Christine Shaw, second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. White,
Yes.
Mr. Hamilton,
I'll abstain.
Mr. Felsigno,
Yes.
Ms. Shaw,
Oh, we lost her again.
oh no,
Oh, no, I'm here.
okay.
The answer is yes. I apologize.
Ms. Kennison,
Yes.
okay, that's everybody.
Thank you. All right, those minutes have passed. All right. The third item on the agenda today is about the fire districts to discuss their pension and their Opeb evaluations. I want to remind everybody the last time we discussed this was at our September meeting. At that meeting, we were just getting an update, and at that time we had only received one pension report from West Shore. So since then, we've received all of the reports, pension and Opeb, except for one is pending, which is Allentown for their Opeb report. In addition, I think that I just wanted to bring to light to the committee is my heart and thoughts go out to those families in West Haven that over the tragic explosion that happened a couple of days ago. So I just want you to know that they're in our thoughts and prayers, and we have the fire district fire chiefs here on the line today. And of course, we always want to remember the great works that our firefighters do for us. So I just want to thank you again for your hard work.
Thank you, Kim. We appreciate that. Thank you.
So let's move on to the pension, and Julian sent us out a very nice table where he has put all of the documents together. before doing that, what I thought would be helpful is for Mike Malone, Mike Walsh, wrong Mike. Mike Walsh to provide us with a quick overview of the history, where we were, where we're at, just to put the groundwork out here before we start to look at these reports. Mike?
Morning, everybody. It's Mike Walsh. Really brief before I turn it over to Jennifer from Milliman. I think we've been waiting to see exactly where the unfunded liabilities for each of the fire districts with respect to pension and OPEB land, and we now have the documents in front of us. So while I could talk for a while on it, I think I'm going to reserve some comments for the end and perhaps just turn it over to Jen. Let her start with first fire pension, then work through OPEB, then move on to West Shore, and then Allentown. Is that okay with you, Jen?
No, that's fine.
All right, after you.
So let me just get the rates report up in front of me here. Okay, so I will go over the first fire pension valuation first. We performed a valuation as of July 1st, 2020. The last valuation that was performed was as of July 1st, 2017. So it's been 3 years since full valuation has been performed. I'm first going to skip over. I don't know. Does everyone have this report in front of them?
Yes, we all do.
Okay. I will first skip to page 13. Gives us a summary of the principal results of the valuation. And as you can see, the plan has just over $14.5 million in assets as of July 1st, 2020, as compared to just under $75 million in liabilities. So an unfunded liability of just over $60 million, just under 20% funded ratio. So we are currently projecting an actuarially determined contribution for the current fiscal year ending June 30th, 2021, of $5.7 million, and then just under $5.9 million for the following fiscal year. If we skip back to page 5 of the report, this is showing a long-range forecast of how we expect the assets to grow over time. Now, this on the top chart. Now, this assumes that the fire district makes the full actuarially determined contribution each year. Now, that's not been the practice up until now, but we wanted to show how we would expect the assets to grow over time if that were to happen. The chart below is probably more important to focus on at this point in time. This is the projection of benefit payments that we expect the pattern over the next 20 years or so to come to fruition as time goes on. And as many of you I'm sure know.
Quick question, what page, can you just identify the page that you're referring to for the chart?
Page 5.
Page 5, okay. Thank you.
So on page 5, so this bottom chart is the projection of benefit payments over the next 20 to 25 years or so. And as you, I'm sure all know, the district is currently paying benefit payments directly out of operating expenses and then putting in a small pre-funding contribution into the trust. So we're currently at a level of about $3.1 million. We expect that to grow about $1 million over the next 10 years or so, and cap out at about $4.2 million per year for quite a period of time, and then it will start to dwindle down. And as we know, this is a legacy group of firefighters, and newer hires are going into the state plan, so they're not considered here. But that is quite an increase over the next 10 years that the district will have to take on. And right now they're currently, like I said, paying those directly out of operating expenses. We're going to be having discussions over the next period of time to think about how to potentially transition to a pre-funding and phased-in contribution pattern, so that will take some pressure off of the district, so that they can rely on their trust to pay benefits in the future, rather than separating those out. And the main reason for that is, if you skip all the way over to page 26 of the report, this section, we talk about risks that the plan is subject to. And there is an insolvency risk for this plan if they can continue to contribute under the current pattern. It's quite out into the future, but we would project that the plan would run out of assets in around 2056. So that's why we want to focus on coming up with a better plan to fund the liability going forward. So those are the main points on this plan that I want to talk about. I'll stop at this point for any questions that anyone may have. Okay. Hearing none, I will now move on to the OPEB plan.
This is Bob White. If I could interrupt for
Sure.
a second. This isn't a question to you, Jen, but to the assembled gathering. To make up if the current pay-go system was to be kept in effect, and your benefits are going to rise by $1 million, roughly what is the mill rate impact, if anybody would know, to fund another $1 million?
We haven't factored any of that in, Bob. This is our first opportunity. As these reports came in, just through the wire, we haven't gotten to those levels yet.
Understood. If we just make a note. Good. Thank you.
Will do.
Hey,
Thank you.
hey, Bob. Hey, Bob. Hey, Kim. This is Mike. I have the fire report in front of me on page 31. For First Fire District, the value of 1 mil is $966,000. So this would almost be equivalent to 1 mil of increased funding.
Perfect. Thank you, Mike.
All right.
Okay, moving on to the OPEB valuation. So this report looks a little different. The district just recently opened up an OPEB trust and put in a small contribution of about $150,000. So essentially, the entire liability as of July 1st, 2020 is unfunded at this point in time. If you go to page 8 of the OPEB valuation report, you can see that the OPEB liability is just about $46 million. A small piece of assets of $150,000. So essentially a 0% funded ratio at this point in time. And if they were to start pre-funding in this upcoming fiscal year, the contribution, the full actuarially determined contribution, would be about $5 million. And again, because prior to now, a contribution has not been calculated because there was no trust. But because there's a trust, we've put together this calculation as a kind of a marker. And again, we're looking at potential strategies for maybe attempting to phase in to a full contribution over a period of time to start pre-funding this benefit. But as of right now, it's in a pay-go status, similar to the other districts within the city.
Hey, Jen, this is Mike. As long as we're talking on First Fire, can I
Yeah.
make a comment going back on the pension? And I apologize for not doing it before we moved on to the OPEB. So for everybody on the call, one of the things I noticed in the report is that there were updated mortality tables, and basically the return that they assume was decreased to 5%. So the net effect of those two increased, if you go to Julian's table, increased the accrued liabilities from about 58.5 million a couple of years ago to 74.9 million. So Jen, the simply changing the mortality tables and decreasing the assumed rate of interest, that's predominantly what caused the increase in the unfunded?
That is correct.
Okay.
In the mortality table, we've updated it to be the most recent table available based on the most recent mortality studies that have been done in the industry. So it's most reflective of what actual expected mortality experience will be for this population. It's a table specific to public safety. And the interest rate assumption was dropped down from 6.75% to 5%, and that's based on the plan's asset allocation. Our analysis of the current asset allocation is that we can expect a long-term rate of return of about 5%. So that's what we use to value the liability.
And Jen, if you can, in the report, if you can walk us through the page 12 executive summary long range forecast, I think that goes
Sure.
to the heart of your 2056 depletion projection. And that'll have us understand what we're doing now, what we should be doing, and probably wave us off from what we might do.
Right. So on page 12, this graph has essentially 5 sets of information. The green bar chart is the baseline projection of contributions, assuming that the district pays the full actuarially determined contribution each year, and that the assets return 5% each year. Okay. The light blue and dark blue dotted lines assume that the assets return 50 basis points less than we assume, so 4.5% per year for the dark blue line, or 100 basis points less than our assumption, 4% per year for the dark blue line, and it shows the impact on the actual determined contribution if returns aren't as high as we assume. And you can see that results in it taking a little bit longer to get to fully funded, and the contributions are greater than zero for a longer period of time. But not too drastic of a change. And the main reason for that is because the funded ratio is low, so there's not a ton of assets in the plan currently, so any deviations is not going to have a dramatic impact due to the leveraging. But what does have a big impact is not making the full contribution year over year. Dark brown line assumes that the district only makes 60% of the contribution per year, and the lighter brown line assumes that the district makes 80% of the contribution per year. And over the last 5 years, the district has been contributing roughly 66% of the contribution, so closer to the dark brown line than the light brown line. So, you can see that to persist in underfunding will lead to some very high contribution requirements in order to avoid having the assets become depleted. This pattern would prevent the assets from becoming depleted, but it would require very significant contributions in the future, upwards of $17.5 million.
So Jen, to say it another way, if we continue on the current trajectory in terms of what we're doing, in terms of what we're budgeting, somewhere around 2038, our contribution will rise to $17.5 million. Is that accurate?
Well, yes, and I want to point out that this projection assumes that the amortization period will go down to 1. So a function of the contribution, a component of the contribution is the amortization of the unfunded liability, and the district is using a declining period. And as of July 1st, 2020, it's 14 years. So this is assuming that period will decline down to 1. In reality, we probably wouldn't actually do that because that would cost too much deposit to the.
You're breaking up a little bit, Jen.
Sorry, it's not. In reality, we wouldn't go down to a 1-year amortization period because that would add too much volatility and it's just not practical. But the point of this graph is to illustrate what it would take to become fully funded, the kind of the hard pill to swallow, so to speak. In reality, we probably do a 10-year layered base, which would smooth things out a bit, but still would require significant contributions in the future to become fully funded.
Got it. That's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jen, is there a smoothing method that's applied to the return assumption baked into this?
Sorry, can you repeat the
And if
question?
so, I'm just curious to know if there's a period of time over which returns are smoothed so that there's an actuarial rate of return as opposed to the actual rate of return?
Yeah, so we're currently not smoothing assets at this point in time. The funded ratio of the funded status of the plan is like I said, low enough is low enough at this point that smoothing wouldn't really provide much upside potential, and that can be kind of illustrated by those blue dotted lines, that those don't swing much, even though we assume under the light blue scenario that the plan continuously underperforms by 100 basis points. It doesn't have as much of an impact. If the funded ratio of the plan was closer to 80 or 90%, that would have a much bigger impact. As the plan's funded ratio improves, we will likely recommend switching over to a smoothing mechanism, most likely a 5-year smoothing, which would recognize investment gains and losses over a 5-year period to dampen the volatility around the market.
Right, because one of the observations that I took away is that there is an $880,000 projected increase in the city's or the district's annual contribution. Is that correct? As a result of the experience, yeah, and that's a lot of volatility, I would say. So, is there any way to kind of soften those year-over-year or valuation over valuation increases?
So the main reason for that volatility is due to the amortization period being at 14. It's a fairly short amortization period. Now, we can always go back and reset that amortization period and spread out the drawdown on that unfunded liability over a longer period of time. It would just take that much longer for the plan to become fully funded. But that's something we could certainly visit and explore.
Yeah, that sounds
But you got
like
to keep it. You just want to keep in mind it is a closed group, and
Yep.
in an ideal world, the plan is fully funded by the time the last remaining active employee retires. Obviously that's an ideal world, but we could think about extending it out to resetting it back to maybe 20 years and going from there. That would have produce a significant impact in savings on the contribution.
perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is Tom Hamilton. When was this plan closed to new hires again?
Back in 2008, I believe.
2008, okay.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, I mean,
anyone hired after 2008 went to the state plan.
And the pay-go scenario essentially has you fairly quickly hitting that $4 million or just over $4 million mark, but then does it really stay there for the rest of the, until all the plan participants have passed on, or does it go up again, step up again at some point out into the future?
No, it'll stay there and it'll start to dwindle away. The thing about pension obligations is to find it's a number that we can predict pretty well. Yes, there is a small COLA associated with the plan, but that's again fairly predictable. So once the last person retires, the benefits aren't going to increase other than that small COLA, and people are going to slowly die off, and the benefit payments will decline over time and eventually come down to zero.
Yeah, so I think I would recommend taking a look at that amortization period. If you can get the pre-funded number somewhere, not, I don't know, something less than that 5.7 million, but more than the 4.1 million, that would be, to me, sort of the sweet spot, if you will, if they could phase into, you know, a point that's maybe, you know, 4.7 million or something like that over a period of a number of years, maybe that would be doable for them. I don't know.
Right. So yeah, I think the first step in looking at a potential phase-in strategy is to first look at a change in the amortization period, and then look at what phase-in would work that would kind of smooth in that increase over time and not be something that could be sustained.
Right. I mean, I guess looking at it from sort of a purely budget standpoint, if somebody says, oh, well, I'm going to max out at 4.1 million anyway, and that's going to happen, and, you know, within the next 5 to 8 years, you know, they may just give up and say, we're not going to,
Right.
you know, attempt to get to a place where we're pre-funding. So.
Mm-hmm.
Good point. Thank you.
I would just say from a policy perspective that, you know, I do think that we have to explore the benefits of extending that amortization period, because it's so much better to pay 100% of what's actuarially required, but a more sustainable payment, rather than, you know, 60% of just a payment that's not even within the realm of reason for what can be allocated on an annual basis.
Hey, Kim, this is Mike. Let me also follow up on Tom's comment and Christine's comment.
Yes.
There's probably, you know, there's a formidable 2 decades at least coming to each of these fire districts. And what I mean by that is you see what the pension trajectory will be, and that will be up. Even if we reset the amortization, going back to what Tom said, somewhere between where they are now and the 5.7. And the reason that's important is because they will also face budgetary pressure for their active medical increases, for their OPEB, either the contribution or the payments coming out of the trust are all medical payments, which is subject to a significantly higher rate of inflation when you compare regular inflation to medical inflation. Wages, and then any capital investment, you know, the equipment that they have certainly needs to be retired at some point in time. So there's at least 5 mouths to feed within each of these buckets. So we're certainly not looking to skirt a pension payment, but make it realistic, because they do face formidable tax increases annually for perhaps, you know, upwards of 20 to 25 years.
Good discussion. Yeah, we definitely want to be able to look at the whole picture of each district, and then hopefully help them get to a 5-year plan, and then they'll understand and be able to understand what a realistic mark for them to be able to make a difference and make sure that they can cover the payments that are due to the retirees. I don't want to cut Jen short on her conversation and also continue to move on. Can we go back to the OPEB? I don't know if we had completed that discussion.
I just wanted to point out one more thing on the OPEB.
Thank you.
If you go to page 9, we have a 10-year projection here of expected payments for the OPEB at 3 different assumptions: at the current medical inflation rate, and at a +1% and -1% inflation rate. So you can see, again, even on the retiree medical side, you're looking at you know, $1 million increase in benefit payments over the next 10 years as well. So and on the OPEB side, there's no pre-funding yet. There's no trust to rely on. So, you know, looking at the bigger picture, you can make some inroads on the pension, and then you can rely on the trust and not worry about paying out of operating expenses for the pension. Then you can focus, the focus can then return to the OPEB. So it's a balance right there. But you're looking at, you know, combined pension and OPEB just for retirees, $2 million of increased budget numbers over the next 10 years.
That's important to note. Thank you.
And then one last thing to point out on the OPEB side, the interest, because the plan is essentially unfunded at this point in time. The interest rate that we're using to value these liabilities is based on a general obligation municipal bond rate, 20-year municipal bond rate as of June 30th, 2020, and it's very low at this point in time. It's a rate of 2.21%. If and when the plan starts to pre-fund and grow its assets, that rate will certainly increase, which will bring the liability down. But as of right now, we have to value that at a municipal bond rate until the plan starts to pre-fund meaningfully.
Okay, thank you.
So that's all I had on the first fire district. If there's no other questions, I can move on to West Shore.
I think we're ready.
All right, so I'll first speak to the West Shore pension report. And this report's slightly different. For West Shore, we haven't been calculating an actuarially determined contribution for several years now, probably about 5 or 6 years. And we've worked with the district to develop a funding, a strategy, a level benefit amount that they can pay that will allow them to kind of keeps their operating expenses with respect to the pension benefits level, and then live off the difference off the pension trust and dwindle it down into the future. I want to bring your attention to page 7 of the pension report.
Yes.
So we've developed this has developed a $2.76 million year-over-year contribution for the next 25 years or so. That is not enough to cover benefit payments year over year, but it covers the majority of the benefit payments, and the rest is drawn down from the trust. The far left-hand column, you can see the value of the trust. It'll grow slightly, and then it'll start to dwindle down to 2047. The trust will run out of money, but at that point in time, the benefit payments we expect to reach a fairly level and declining period. At that point, benefit payments will max out at $3 million, and then in 2046, and then slowly decline over the next several years. So this is designed so that in reality, the district will never have to budget more than $2.76, give or take, $1 million year over year. So that's a predictable flat budget that is not expected to increase under this scenario that we've helped them develop. So it's not a full pre-funding. It's more of a drawdown. Again, this is a legacy group. The plan is, again, not funded very well. And this is certainly something we could also explore with First Fire District as well. But it's another option. But this is the route that the West Shore Fire District had chosen to go down.
Yeah.
The next page on page 8 is just a phase into that level contribution over a 7-year period. This is for illustrative purposes, but I believe that the district has chosen to go with the scenario on page 7.
This is Bob White. I'm not sure I understand your explanation on page 7. Are you saying essentially if they keep funding at 276, they're going to be, assuming the assumptions you've made hold true, that they're going to be okay on the pension side and not have to increase their contribution?
Right. So the idea under this scenario is that they're going to contribute $2.76 million to the trust each year and then pay benefit payments. You can see in the 4th column is the benefit payments. So, yep. And you can see the benefit payments are higher than their contributions, which is why the trust will eventually start to dwindle down. It grows early on because that's greater than the benefit payments coming out. The investment return plus contribution is greater than the benefit payments coming out. But eventually that trust, they'll have to draw down the trust, but they're going to contribute a flat 2.76 million till 2046. You see a little bit of a blip because there's a lagging time, that 5,000. Those 2 years are probably blended together. That's more of just a blip. But at that point, then they're going to contribute slightly higher. Then at that point, the trust, come to 2047, the trust has run out of money, but the benefit payments have dwindled down to 2.9 million. So they'll have a slight increase that 1 year, and then just pay benefit payments. And then that figure is declining year over year, because at this point, there's very few members. Everyone's retired, and there's few members left in the plan. And as they die, the benefit payments will decrease.
So essentially, under this scenario, no increase in the mill rate will be required to fund the pension.
Correct. Because, it's a budgetary.
Wonderful. Let's stop there.
So just some additional questions. It's an interesting concept here. This is almost like a cash flow analysis, but am I correct in assuming that a key here is your investment, you're assuming a 3.5% rate of return, is that correct? And I guess more importantly, you're assuming it's a very steady 3.5% every year in, year out. And I'm wondering, I don't know what their investment mix is, but I'm assuming right now to get 3.5%, they've got to be, got to have some money in equities. And I'm just wondering what happens if your returns are sort of more lumpy and you've got negative returns some years and positive returns other years. It averages out to 3%, but how does that affect this scenario?
Yeah, certainly. So this actually is assuming a 6% return year over year, and that is based on their current asset allocation, which is roughly 60% in equity, and the rest in fixed income or some kind of or some hedge funds, some alternative assets. So we worked with the investment manager, the investment advisor, and came up with a long-term return assumption of 6%. But again, this is a deterministic assumption of a projection that assumes the 6% every year. And in reality, we know that's not going to necessarily happen. So that could put some pressure, and then this would need to be revised in years if we have a couple of years in a row of poor investment return. That depletion date of 2047 is just going to get here faster, and there might be an increase at some point, 20, 30 years out as a result. They could live on the 2.76 for a while, but that it would just say the money ran out in 2043. If you look at that line, benefit payments that year are $3.3 million. So you're talking about a $600,000 increase just to cover the benefit payments and then draw down. So this is not something that we're just going to set it at 2.76 and forget about it. We're going to keep an eye on it over the, every 2 years when we do a valuation, we're going to look at it again, make sure it still makes sense. The alternative is to do a more robust analysis and take into account the fact that returns aren't going to necessarily return 6% per year.
But under this methodology, we just push it out there, flat payments even further.
Yeah, and you might look at a slight increase in the flat payment, not a drastic $1 million increase in any given year, but we could say in a few years from now, okay, maybe your 2.6 needs to increase to 2.8 million or something like that, for example.
Okay, very good.
They are currently making this contribution, this 2.76?
Yes, that's my understanding.
One more question from Bob White. You had mentioned that one could think about applying this method to the first district. What would be the steps that they had to take to kind of get on this train?
I think that it would just be a matter of us performing the analysis and coming up with what numbers work for their situation. We might fall in the same region of 2.76, or we might fall in a different region. And how does that compare to where they're currently at? And like I mentioned earlier, there's been some discussions about looking at different strategies going forward as to how to fund the pension plan. And this certainly could be one of the strategies that we look at as a compared to other potential strategies, and see what numbers make
Good.
most sense for the district.
Very good.
Thank you.
So just a follow-up question on the point of strategies. Is there, I know there's been some discussion over the past year about exploring the feasibility of consolidating the investment program for these districts. In other words, try to, spend less on fewer managers instead of having discrete systems, kind of bringing them under one umbrella. Is that included among the range of benefits that could generate some revenue or increase the funded ratio?
I don't know. So, Christine, that's probably something that is for the next agenda item when we talk about the Try Districts and see
Okay.
where they're at with the Try District MOU.
Got it. Okay.
That level might not have even gotten to the actuary is what I'm thinking.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Sorry, Jen, can we,
That's okay.
are we
Would
finished
you
with
like to
this?
move?
Yes, please.
Yep, we can move on to the OPEB for West Shore then.
Thank you.
Which I don't have open. Just give me 1 minute to open it up.
No problem.
Apologize.
I can learn to understand you much better.
Sorry about that. Again, this is going to be very similar. For the Western Fire as of yet. But again, first fire district was affected.
We're losing you again, Jen.
Sorry. The report provides the same information. Again, the plan is unfunded, has a liability of about $34 million. And again, this is at a discount rate of 2.21%, 3.5%. So the reason for this discount rate being different than at first fire district is the West Shore Fire District valuation was done as of July 1st, 2019. They're on an odd year cycle. So the municipal bond rate at that point in time was 3.5%. So that's what we use to value the liability. So you can see that the municipal bond rate has dropped significantly over the last year. And so, we'll just keep an eye on it. But until the plan shows meaningful funding, we can't value it at anything other than this.
Thank you. That was one of our questions.
Yep. But if you go to page 5 of the report, we do have some sensitivity analysis shown here. If the discount rate were, say, 1% lower, so that would be 2.5%. So it's still slightly higher than the 2.21 used for first fire district, but closer in the more of the ballpark, and that's yielding a liability of just under $41 million. So it's very sensitive to the discount rate. And again, until there's any kind of meaningful funding, we need to use a municipal bond rate as opposed to a long-term rate of return on plan assets. And again, on page 6 of this report is the expected payouts over the next 10 years at the different medical inflation assumptions. We're not expecting as much of an increase for this plan as we are for first fire district over the next 10 years, closer to a $250,000 to $300,000 increase over the next 10 years for this plan. And at that point, I'll leave if there's any other questions. Okay, so then I can move on. So for the Allentown Fire District, we are still working on the Opeb evaluation and expect to have that completed in the next week or two. But the pension valuation has been done for some time, so we can go over that today. And again, if we bring our attention to page 5, now this plan was closed in 2013, so it's closed a little later. So you can see on page 5 on the bottom graph, the benefit payments we're expecting over the course of the next 10 years or so for the benefit payments to increase about $600,000. Then continue to increase some more because there's still more active employees in this plan because it was closed. So there's a longer horizon on this plan. So at this point in time, we've only projected out 20 years, but it's maxing out at 2.8 at this point in time. I don't know if that's the peak yet. But again, it's going to steadily increase over time for the foreseeable future. On page 13, you can see that the plan is about 25% funded, an unfunded liability of $24 million, and an actuarially determined contribution of about $2.4 million. The district has made the full contribution for the last year or two. I believe the intention is to try to continue to make that contribution. But again, if you go to page 17, you can see that's expected to increase a bit every year, maybe 100,000 to 200,000 per year over the next 10 years or so. And again, this assumes that the amortization period goes down to 1, when in reality we might not actually do that. We might kind of level it out a little bit to protect them from volatility. But again, we don't see as drastic of a ramp up in the increase as we do in some of the other districts. And to speak to the interest rate, again, this plan does reflect the updated mortality. This plan is using a higher interest rate assumption of 6.75%. And again, that's reflective of the current asset allocation, which is currently in, it's 60% of it is in long credit bonds. And interesting, so their exposure to equity is not nearly as high as some of the other districts, but it's still yielding a longer rate of return because of the rates on these long credit bonds. Long credit bonds are a really good match to pension liabilities. So they provide less volatility and as longer return that matches our return assumption pretty well. So that's why we're at 6.75% for this particular plan. So that there's lots of variation in the interest rate assumption across all the plans, as you can see, but it is a function of whether or not they're funding and what, for those that are funding, what the asset allocation is, which varies quite a bit across the different fire districts.
Okay. This is all helpful. Any other questions for Jen Milliman?
Jen, Bob White, the page, where were you, page 17? Are you on?
Yes.
Does this say that, I'm just trying to figure out what happens in 2032 or 3.
Mm-hmm.
The city
if
doesn't make.
At that point, the city will be fully funded, and which means there'll be enough money in the trust to just draw down on the trust for the rest of for the future of the plan. So they won't have to make any more contributions, and then just pay benefits out of it until the last retiree dies. Now, that's again assuming that the assumptions, reality matches our assumptions exactly. That won't happen, and that picture could change. But under this projection, they would become fully funded, 100% funded in 2033, and no longer need to contribute.
Wow. Okay, thank you.
But they're funding the ADEC.
Therefore, yeah, that's fully funding the contribution, which they've done in the last couple of years.
So at that
They don't-
point, you're still showing member contributions. So does that mean there's still active members in the plan in 2032?
Yeah, that's what that means. There's still probably a small handful of active members in the plan, which is evident if you go back to page 5. You can see the benefit payments are still growing in 2033. So that to me, the fact that benefit payments are still growing throughout the entire 20-year projection tells me that everyone has not retired by the end of that 20-year period yet. But there's probably just like 2 or 3 people left by that point in time.
So actually, this one doesn't look so bad,
As long as the budget can fund that to the level that it's funding is the issue. It doesn't look
Right.
bad as long as the budget can handle the increases up to the city's Allentown fire district's 3.3 when you get all the way up to the 2030s.
Right.
Okay, so because it's going to grow from the 2.4, so you still got a very large jump of $1 million.
What was my phone cut out at one point. I apologize. What was the assumption you were using? This is Steve Felsig now. As far as the interest rates and on some of these actual assets.
So for Allentown, the interest rate assumption is 6.75%, and this one just depends on it's a function of the plan's asset allocation and how their assets are invested. So to the extent we analyze each allocation separately and determine using our capital market assumptions what the long-term expected rate of return is going to be. And when we mean long-term, we're talking about 50 years out, not just a 10 or 20 year long-term. And then use that to develop the interest rate assumption. So the asset allocations vary greatly across the different districts. Therefore, the interest rate assumptions vary greatly.
Okay, so, and I always seem to be the one that kind of says things like this, so I apologize first, but all these assumptions that you're making are assuming that the mindset of the district is in line with, or continues to be in line with the assumptions that you're making, right? I mean,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we are in 2020 in a pandemic, and I understand that your actuarial is going all the way up, and we're hoping that we're going to be basically even in 2033. But there's so many assumptions that I think the policymakers in West Haven have to buy into also, that are very important.
Correct.
Right.
And like I said, this is just one set of assumptions.
Right.
And one set of outcomes. We could look at thousands of different outcomes and then rank them and
right.
with probabilities that any given outcome would happen.
Right.
That's beyond the scope of the evaluation.
No, I understand what the scope is of the evaluation.
Yeah.
My point is just as the subcommittee or a person on the subcommittee, these are the things that, and I mean it's really impressive. All the work you've done here. But again, as a person on the subcommittee, I need to just bring it up to my subcommittee members, and not that they don't know this already, but I think that some of the assumptions have to really is really out of everybody's control. What happens?
Yeah. Especially when this evaluation is based on 2019, so
Right.
already we didn't know we were going to go into a pandemic then.
No, of course, and
right.
and I mean, and what you've done here is really impressive. It's very informative. So thank you.
And again, Jen, the reason for us to make sure that that's why actuary reports are normally updated every 2 years.
Yes, and quite honestly, the Government Accounting Standards Board requires that they be done no less than every 2 years.
There you go.
Bob,
Well, thank you very
quick
much.
question again
That's
on,
interesting enough.
sorry, Steve.
Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah, quick question on page 17 again. I noticed that the funding in the out years after 33, the funding ratio goes above 100%. Does that mean there's a surplus?
Yes, yeah, that's a surplus that's being built up by the investment return, which eventually will, if we were to project this out even further, that would eventually dwindle down.
Right. I don't want to suggest this is a policy, but what is the impact of slightly reducing the city's contributions in the near term?
So pensions come down to a proposition of pay now or pay more later. So they could certainly reduce their contributions now. It would just take them longer to become fully funded, and they'd pay more in the long term. The sum
And they
of all
pay
the
more
contributions
because
because they're not. There's two components that fund these benefits. There's the contributions and there's investment returns. So the less they put in now, the less they're letting earn in returns.
okay.
The lower the
All right.
assets
So
are,
we
the less
can't
return they're going to earn.
So we can't make use of the out year surplus now. There's
No,
going to be a
no.
benefit. There'll be a benefit in the out years
And
to.
quite honestly, in reality, once they got to that point of time where there's just retirees left and they're 100% funded, we would start talking with the district about changing their asset allocation and becoming more conservative to take some of the risk off the table, which would then change the interest rate assumption and change the picture drastically. But it could still be at, keep them at 100%. But, once you're fully funded, you don't need to take on as much risk. You want to preserve that funded status. So the investment strategy would change as the plans became better funded. But they're so, right now you want to be return seeking to an extent, keep your risk at within a manageable level, but still return seeking. Once you reach 100% or 105% or so, you want to change that strategy to try to preserve that funded status and not lose it to the market because there's a pandemic or something, market meltdown.
Don't talk about another pandemic, please. Thank you very much.
So just to follow up on Bob's question, would it be appropriate in your judgment or not appropriate to look at that amortization period and potentially stretch that out a bit? You're at 14 years now, it looks like, 14 years left.
Yeah, so again, we can certainly do that for all these districts, and it will lower the contributions now, but make them last for longer. And in the long run, you'll pay more, but if it helps you, makes it more affordable, then that might be a trade-off that's worth it to these districts. So we could certainly look at the amortization period for all the districts, because they're all getting to the shorter end of the spectrum. And these amortization periods were set many years ago, and we haven't touched them yet. But that is a card that they have that they could definitely utilize, especially given the circumstances and the times. A lot of municipalities and whatnot have been looking at their amortization period because it's just been very tough times lately.
Yeah, I'm just wondering. I think you had mentioned earlier if you were to. It does seem to make a certain amount of sense to say we want to amortize the unfunded liability such that the plan is fully funded when the last person retires. But it looks like in the case of Allentown, they're actually going to beat that based on your projections. So
yes. So certainly it could make sense here to lengthen it, and it would be definitely something that could be supported, and I'd be comfortable.
Okay, well, it's good to know. I mean, I'm not suggesting they do it immediately, but at least it gives them a potential card to play. So
some options. That's a really good discussion. Thank you.
And I would just add to that, I'm not even sure if 100% fully funded ought to be the goal. I mean, I think that a case can be made that a healthy pension plan where, you know, the plan assets are anywhere between 75 and 85, that to me is a very strong plan. And you could still invest the assets in a way that's not unduly risky, and, you know, you can still, you know, have manageable over your employer contribution. So I also think that I understand as a technical matter, you've got to model these amortization periods, assuming 100% funding status at the end of the period. But, you know, as we think about, you know, that option, I think that the bogey is a little bit different than 100%, or at least we ought to discuss that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Go ahead, Tom.
I was just going to say, you know, especially given the what, you know, looks like on the Opeb side, the costs are still, you know, rising pretty substantially, and maybe it makes sense to structure this so that they have a little more flexibility to address Opeb if they've got a little bit of wiggle room here on the pension side.
Great point, Tom.
Yeah, and I don't want to overstate this, but I believe the point is critically important, and that is there needs to be a more realistic, you know, long-term plan such that there are 100% of the contributions, whether it's, you know, a lower amount, whether it costs more over time because you're extending the period. I think that the discipline behind full funding of the ADEC is what's going to allow for these two demands, both the liabilities as well as the underlying pension liability.
Is that it for questions on these actuary and OPEB reports? Jen, I want to thank you very much for your hard work. This great reports that we have yearned to receive. I want to thank all of you for doing this hard work and getting them the data that they need to get these reports to us, for sharing your information with us, because it's for the good of the residents of West Haven. And also, I think we got some really good outcomes from this meeting. I appreciate you making sure that Milliman was on the phone today to answer some questions. I think we had some good conversation today, and I look forward to the next steps of moving forward with this. So this is a good meeting. Thank you.
It's been my pleasure.
All right, then let's move on to the next.
Thank you, Jen.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Jen. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the Try District MOU. And Chief, who's going to, I'm going to guess it's going to be Chief O'Brien, because he spoke last time, but you tell me.
I'm sorry, what was the question? It was about the MOU?
Yeah, we're looking for an update on the Try District MOU. You had spoke at the last meeting, so I wasn't sure if it's you. I'm not trying to put you on point unless somebody else is taking the lead.
We're on the same page here.
There you go.
So it's taken us a little bit longer. We do have an MOU that's agreed upon. There is one change in the paragraph that since our last meeting has come up. We believe we've corrected that. West Shore's the first one's meeting this month. They're going to be meeting tomorrow. Once we expect that final draft with the modification to be approved, and then the center and Allentown will follow suit. So I think we're on track to in the next by the end of the month, I would say.
Well, thank you. Then we'll look for an update on that at an upcoming meeting.
Yeah, we just had some language between attorneys that came up last minute, but I think they resolved that.
Perfect. Very good. Then we can now move on to the work of the city, but I want to thank the chiefs, the commissioners that have joined us today. And if city council has joined us, I appreciate all of you and coming together. And we know that we're in a partnership to help the city of West Haven.
Okay, thank you, Kim, to you and your staff for working with us and explaining the process. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you all chiefs. Okay, next item on the agenda is the corrective action plan for fiscal year 2019. Frank, do you want to bring us up to date if there's any changes?
Yeah, we haven't had any changes. I think the items that are still open are the ones that we have no control over. For example, trying to get all the pension plans together. We're going to need commissioner buy-in from all of that. We have the open position in the purchasing department, so that item remains open. We're trying to figure out what to do there.
Can I talk about that before we move on? So you said it's in the budget for January?
Correct.
Okay, so you haven't been able to fill the position because you don't have the funding.
What are you talking about? The purchasing. Oh, that was the council thing. Yeah, yeah, that was the council decided to cut the funding on that position.
Right, understand. So we're at November the 17th. I would say if I was going to hire a position for January, since you didn't get the funding released to address this, which I think is unfortunate, but I do, knowing that you're at November 17th and your attorney is here so he can make a comment if needed, but could you then start to post this position and oh, this one is the one that's posted inside. You already have the person, they need to move over, is that right? And they're doing payroll work, or no?
Yes.
Well, yes and no. I would just say we anticipate filling it quickly. There's an individual who has rights in a particular union, and we had to post that position, the benefit position in that union. So it's a little fluid, but we will have no trouble filling a purchasing position. We advertise it simultaneously with capable union people and also at the outside. We don't wait. So it will be filled the second the budget allows us to fill it.
You can't have somebody pending the hire date of January 1 since the funds are there for January 1. So
Yes,
it takes 6 weeks to find somebody? Okay.
No.
So that's
doing it. Yes, we're in the process right now. So we'll have somebody in place the second we can spend the funds. I can't tell you if that'll be an in-house person or someone from the outside.
Oh, okay. So all right. So hopefully you'll have somebody there for January.
Yes, we will.
Perfect.
Yeah, that's the plan.
Okay. Matt, you're on the line today. I know it's a closed item, but I have the auditors started already?
Yes.
Okay. So have they started they're in-house and they're doing their testing?
Yeah,
they're
today, I believe.
Oh, did they just started?
No, they've been here a couple times.
They've been in-house before, and they've
Oh,
begun
okay.
their testing.
Okay. I just want to reiterate item number 1.
Here now. Talk to them.
No, thank you, Lee. The next item, the one item I wanted to bring to your attention is to make sure that you did a good deep dive into the accruals for the education side that we know is supposed to be closed, but I just want to make sure that you've looked at that through a microscope so that we can make sure that all payables are booked in the proper year.
Yes, everything we've discussed and put in place was done.
Perfect. Very good. No pension, no changes on alternative investment. Frank, how about the capital assets for the Allentown?
Yeah, they sent in their asset list to Bob Z, and we're going through that now.
Okay.
Now, what I will say is that when they sent the list over, they did say that they're going to do a full physical inventory in the next couple of months, which I would have hoped that they had done that before, sending the list, since I had talked to them a year ago about this.
Mm-hmm.
But I will circle back with them to at least make sure that when they do the physical inventory, that it's a true inventory.
Mm-hmm. It's not listed, is that, oh, they said that was one of the findings, is that they wanted the physical inventory to be completed, correct?
Yeah, I think the finding was that that their capital list hasn't had any deletions in several years.
Okay.
Which doesn't necessarily make sense, especially with, like air packs and that kind of stuff normally only have a 10-year life.
So under that scenario, since the information was sent to Bob Z, you probably, it hasn't been sent to the auditor yet, correct?
I believe Bob is compiling it. The goal is to get the auditors everything that they need this week.
So before giving it to the auditor, I would suggest that you take a look at that list, and if there's items on that list that look very dated, that I would look back to Allentown Fire Department and see if they can quickly confirm some items. As long as you make some progress at that you shouldn't get written up, and you could slot the full physical inventory to go into play for next year's assets. But this
I've
year,
already done that.
Oh, you have? Okay.
I've already gone through it. They had, for example, a couple of computers that were on there that were, 8 to 10 years old. I don't understand how those weren't replaced. So yeah, I've sent them a list of questions. I'm waiting to hear back.
Okay. I would definitely put, I would deplete those and remove them from the inventory if you know that they're not there anymore.
That is exactly what I told them.
Perfect. The next one is the Student Activity Fund. Matt, any update on software for there? And I know that it was the prior auditor that was giving you some direction, but did you reach out to the current auditor?
Yeah, the current auditors are putting something together for me.
Okay.
We should have something, a software system picked within the next few weeks. And then we'll begin the training on the school administrators on how to use the software.
Okay. You have to purchase it though, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's all I have for the audit issues. If anybody has any comments on the 2019 audit issues, findings that are being worked on. Okay, so let's move on to the next agenda, which is number 6, and the fiscal year closed and the audit process. How are you? I heard they're here, so how are we doing?
They are here. The books are closed. All the trial balances have been sent to them. We are in the process of, we finally, this week, or actually Friday they sent it, we finally got the statement of changes for the pension funds.
Mm-hmm.
So those will be closed out, and that's the difficulty that we had last year as well, is that it's not necessarily internally trying to get things done. It's waiting for third parties to send us the information.
Yeah.
And I think historically, West Haven has been so late in their audits that, quite frankly, these third parties just assume that they're going to be on the bottom of the list again.
Of course.
There are other priorities, and so I'm fighting a battle of, yeah, we're serious, we want this, and we want it on time.
Right. Yeah, you're bumping somebody else's book of business and making it conflicting for them. Understand?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Keep it up.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. At one point I was sending weekly emails to these people saying, "Where is it? Where is it? Where is it?"
All right. Any questions for West Haven on the year-end close and audit? Frank, one other item is as they bring items to your attention, even if it's offline, will you please keep me abreast of the findings as they are coming up?
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you. And the next item on the agenda is for an update on the HR Corrective Action Plan. ADP implementation.
Yep. So the ADP implementation, I'm a little more comfortable than I was a week ago. As I think we mentioned at the full MARB meeting, we did have a temp that came in with ADP experience, significant payroll experience, and she has been working with Doug and Aaron to help drive this project. She has been designated as the change agent, at least to help roll out, along with ADP, to the employees, to get them up and aware. We have a call weekly with ADP, and the call that's scheduled next week is where we will have the go, no-go decision.
Okay.
They're currently in the process of starting to test the data. I would have preferred that had started a couple of weeks ago, but as you can imagine, the data that we had to send them had significant gaps in it. So there's been some difficulty pulling everything together for ADP, but I think they've got everything they need now. The biggest issue I think we have now is that, I mean, Doug and Aaron are just burning out, and I don't want to see that.
Yeah.
Which is why, you know, I'm glad we have this additional person. The benefits HR position has been posted. We did have one internal person that would be qualified, so we need to set up the discussions with that. And we did get, I'm told, over 80 or resumes when it was posted on Indeed. So they are in the process of going through these. I think the mayor wanted to take a look at them as well. So I'm expecting to have that position filled. I'm hoping shortly, but we are moving forward. That I did actually walk in with Beth Sabo this morning, and she did mention to me that she wanted to get together so that we can discuss the moving forward actions on getting this position filled.
Very good. I think this is one of the positions I had offered to interview the finalists with Mr. Tiernan.
Yep.
And the mayor.
Yeah, and we're going to take you up on that, Tennyson. So we did get a lot of resumes, but what I would preface that with is when you focus on those with benefit experience, you thin the pile out very quickly.
Yep.
Our target would be to have just 4 or 5 candidates for interview and either whittle it down to the candidate or whittle it down to 2.
Yep.
So I think we feel pretty good that we'll have all qualified candidates for you to review along with us.
Perfect. Okay, I do see that you have a lot of items that are on this list that have missed the deadline, so I think that that's where your issue is lying with it going off the rails. And I had some concerns with it, as I mentioned to you before. And so I'm glad that you have somebody on board to help with this process. And I would be looking, and I'm sure that the committee would be looking for an update as to whether this is a go or a no-go decision. And if it's a no-go, I'm assuming you're just prolonging it to when, you know, what would that decision be? You know, 3 months, a year?
No, week to week.
It would be a week-to-week decision. The decision would be go, no-go for the January 1st payroll.
Okay, and if you miss the January 1st payroll, is your intentions that you're going to have a cutoff year and you're going to backfill the data?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is not, obviously it's not a preferential situation where you have the data in 2 different systems.
Right.
But we could certainly work with ADP. the fewer number of payrolls that are actually captured outside of the ADP system, it would be easier to get that data put in.
I would agree.
But you
Okay.
can see that, you could see on the chart there, on the grid, what I was alluding to before, it's pretty much every box is either Doug or Aaron, and that's like 80 to 90% of the boxes that have that in there, and that's what my concern is.
Yeah.
They're being stretched thin.
Yeah. Yeah, and it still seems like though there's some substantial data that needs to get moved into the new system.
Yes. Yeah, and that's what they're working through now. We've got, they've sent us some preliminary schedules for the UAT and some of the scripts that they want to go through to test the data, and that's what we're gearing up for.
So would they consider then taking a look at this work plan and changing the due date, and either changing the due date or creating a new to be determined date in here, or putting it in your comments? Because it just keep continuing to look at, that you missed the deadline until you get it. I think that you should have a new due date of when they must have that in their plan of what they need first versus later.
Yep, and I think I don't know if we have a call today, I think, this afternoon.
We meet with them. We have a lower level nuts and bolts meeting, and we have a higher level, make sure everybody is on board meeting for the, for lack of a better phrase, supervisory people. So we're meeting every single week. So I think we could deal with that. And ADP is cognizant of it. They certainly don't want to fail. They've offered us additional resources to make sure we get to the finish line. They did send us our time clocks. I mean, it's moving along. I think they're going to instruct us. They don't want the contract to fail. They'll instruct us if they don't think they can make it. And we're all sitting there. Yeah, we're all sitting there with eyes wide open too as to whether we can make it. Look, killing a dog is the only thing worse than failing to get somebody their paycheck. You hear about it very quickly. So there's no room for failure. It has to be exact. So we're very cognizant of it. We think about it at every single one of these weekly meetings. And if we think we'll have to move the date, that's going to happen. But right now we're chugging along. I think the other side of it too, Ms. Kennison, is the fact that we want to keep the pressure on. If we say to people that the deadline's not going to be there, we fear people pull back, and they don't want to keep the deadline fluid.
Nope, understand. I do. It is a pressure when you're doing these projects. My concern is that there was a lack of staff, and that's why, if you were to ask me, the lack of staff is what caused this. You needed extra bodies to pull this project off. So now it's coming to a halt. And so I hope that we're able to make this deadline. That's my wish.
Yeah. And I've instructed the person we recently brought on that their only workload is this. This is 100% okay. This is what their focus should be on. Unfortunately, I have experience with Frank's group at Perkin-Elmer. But I guess you can't screen everybody completely.
Don't hold that against her. And to your point, Kim, regarding the new dates, I think what I was trying to allude to before is that the conversation that I want to have with them is before the go no go decision next week. I think we need to understand what those drop dead dates are. So if we don't have this data by this particular time, the whole thing comes to a halt. And I think we need to understand that.
Right. Yeah. If you don't have the data for, benefit information, or you can't print a report because you didn't develop the reports, all the data in. If you can't get out, you need to have a payroll register,
Correct. And we're focusing, what they've done is they're focusing on the payroll aspect of it first. and
Yes.
then going into the benefit side of it, so that at least come January 1st, knock wood, that first payroll cycle will be in their system.
Yeah, that makes sense. Any questions from the members? Okay, and the HR Corrective Action Plan, I know that now that we have Mike Malone back, we have Julian and Mike were working as well as Mayor and Frank on trying to get the Corrective Action Plan updated and break it out a little more. Mike, do you have any comments on the HR Corrective Action Plan, or Mayor?
It's Michael. With Julian's help and his great technical skill, we've made a lot of progress in the last 2 weeks. What Julian's helped me do is to take what I had as a probably very confusing flow chart of activities and responsibilities and timelines and everything else into a plan that's more clearly understandable to the people who have to implement it, and also expanding on the tasks required in order to accomplish most of what we need to accomplish. So I'm hopeful we're going to be meeting again on Thursday, that very shortly you'll see a much clearer, more informative plan than the last one that was presented. And I think it'll also allow for a much clearer roadmap for the people who have to follow it to understand the responsibilities and the steps to achieve each of the respective objectives and the long-term goal of what this is hoping to accomplish. We also have to work on possibly modifying some of the positions in the budget further, just to bring consistency to what the Human Resources Consulting Group had suggested. There needs to be a little better alignment there, and that's something that we'll work on with the city in the development of next year's budget.
Very good. Okay, we'll look forward to that, Michael. Thank you for you and Julian and working with the city to get this get a plan together. Any questions from the members? That's my last item on the agenda, unless anybody else has items to discuss today. If not, okay, I will make ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Steve Felsigner.
Thank you, Steve. Second.
Bob White. Second, Tom Hamilton.
Thank you. All right, I know we are all in favor, so we shall thank you, and we won't see you till after the holiday, so I wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, and
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy
Thank you all.
Thanksgiving, everyone.
Take care.
Thanks,
You
everyone.
too.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving.